What? No, it's not the same sweater. Hey all. I was thinking about talking about aging parents and the relationships they have with their aging offspring. Mostly because I spent a weekend recently with my in-laws, slept at the mother-in-law's house, socialized with sisters-in-law and brothers-in-law, as well as some nephews and nieces and even a grandniece. Yeah, my parents-in-law are great-grandparents now and soon to repeat. Who is having babies in this tumultuous world we're leaving behind? I've not had a lot of direct experience with dealing with aging parents. My dad was only 37 when he passed away. I was on another continent when my mother gradually began to fade. She was only 68, but had been compromised by a stroke a few years earlier. My grandma Olive was still pretty lucid the last time I saw her, living in an old people's supported apartment complex, baking her own pies and socializing with the other old folk in the building. People like my Aunt Maxine, who would have been in her late 60s the last time I saw her, didn't seem like she would ever grow truly old, though a later photo I caught on Facebook showed a rather frail old woman with that somewhat blank look in her eye that you sometimes see as the elderly person begins to check out. Dealing with aging, elderly parents? Well, I saw that happen both through my Grandma Olive and my Aunt Maxine. In both cases, these women cared for their elderly mothers, the fathers had died, in their homes. In the case of Grandma Olive, I'm pretty sure she chose to care for my great-grandmother mainly for economic reasons, maybe even because the concept of old folks' home had only come into fashion in the mid-60s. I don't have many memories of the care Grandma Olive gave her mother. I suppose my great-grandmother Campbell was staying with Grandma Olive that time right after my father died that my mother took us up to visit and scout out a new home. I remember this very, very old woman, dressed in a long white night garment like a gown, gray, fizzy hair. She wandered about the house and no one talked to her besides Grandma Olive, who mainly just gave her orders like, "Sit down," or "Don't touch that." One of the family legends about great-grandmother Campbell was that she got out of bed every night and wandered about the house, unplugging any and all electrical items that were plugged in. You'll see that in an essay I'll share later. Great-grandmother Campbell died not long after my father died. I didn't attend the funeral, just the visitation, saw her in her coffin. That's all. In the case of Grandma Pearl, my Aunt Maxine's mother, well, that was kind of a saga. I've talked a bit about this in some episode from an earlier season. I'll leave the link where links belong. For those who don't want to go listen to that one, the summary is more or less: Grandma Pearl was originally a farm wife born just at the turn of the 20th century. She had strict Christian morality and a rural-class work ethic that she infused in each of her 4 children. Her oldest, Uncle Lyle, took over the family farm when his father died after a farm failure and bankruptcy. Aunt Maxine married a Navy man who worked for several years as a machinist. They built 2 houses together, then moved to and managed a large family farm in Wisconsin for several decades. Aunt Doris married a military man and became a military wife and a fairly respectable woman in all the communities in which she lived. My dad worked hard even up to the day he died at 37. Sometime not long after my dad died in 1969, Grandma Pearl had the first stroke that I was aware of. Doctors waived the kids under 12 can't visit rule because they all thought she was near death. She was not. She lived another, I don't remember, I'd say some 20-some years, to continue having strokes and continue deteriorating. My dad being dead and Uncle Lyle having died just a couple of years after that, my aunts Maxine and Doris shared the burden of caring for their aging mother. Sometimes Grandma Pearl would stay with Aunt Doris. Sometimes she was able to stay in her own little grandma cottage in the tiny village of Pawpaw. Sometimes she would stay on the farm in Wisconsin with Aunt Maxine. There was a short period of time when she, like my Grandma Olive would later do, lived in an apartment complex with special senior supervision. Grandma Pearl's end time, though, would be spent on the farm with Aunt Maxine. I wasn't present during this end time, though I had spent a summer on the farm during one of Grandma Pearl's longer stays up there, a couple of years before she passed away. Before casting my net back to the mid-1980s, though, let's briefly bounce back to my in-laws. Here is a slightly fictionalized version of what's up with that. He is 84, and she is 82. They still live at home. He still drives, though he is restricted to only driving to the supermarket, sometimes to the beach, and to a nearby village where he has a small plot of land with a cottage and his vegetable garden. I personally don't like riding with him. He doesn't always pay attention to the act of managing a moving vehicle at 100 kilometers an hour. He has fallen into that familiar loop of forgetting where his keys are, where he left his phone, then reminding himself that he has forgotten, then using little mind tricks to help him remember, which mainly remind him that he is forgetful. He does forget things, but worse is this self-defeating loop he repeats to himself, and others repeat to him, that he is becoming a forgetful person. She is sharper, no memory problems. While he is active, walks the dog, works in the garden, is basically a powerhouse of nervous energy, she is sedentary, has stopped doing the housework herself, barely stands long enough to prepare meals, spends most of her time on the sofa scrolling on her phone. When she does get off the sofa, it is accompanied by sighs of pain and complaints about her poor health. That is her loop. She can't do anything because she is poorly. She is poorly because she doesn't do anything. Now, when my Grandma Olive took care of my great-grandmother Campbell, well, Olive was already a grandma. Grandma Olive was probably in her mid-50s when she acted as a caregiver. Aunt Maxine was probably in her early 60s as she cared for Grandma Pearl. All of my brothers and sisters-in-law are in the age range of 50 to 60. Those older people need care, but the people available to care are getting older too. As I watch my brothers and sisters-in-law navigate the stormy waters of two elderly parents needing more and more attention while trying to attend to their own lives of work, children, family, friends, I think, of course, about how Grandma Olive and Aunt Maxine approached the situation. They were both actually quite pragmatic. This person is elderly. This person behaves in this fashion because this person is elderly. This person needs this type of care because this person is elderly. These aspects of this person's personality are accentuated because, you guessed it, this person is elderly. My father-in-law does not need his children to lecture him on taking his pills or controlling his sugar intake. He does not need them to tell him that he needs to be careful where he leaves his phone or his keys. He does not need them to instruct him on the changes they think he needs to make. He is as he is. He is an elderly man who needs a particular type of care and attention. He will not change, ever, no matter how many times his children lecture, or cry, or shout, or manipulate. My mother-in-law does not listen to anything her children try to tell her. She is a master of excuses, or maybe simply master of excuse. I don't feel well. No matter how many attempts have been made to get her to socialize, to move her body off the sofa, to enjoy the life she currently has, she has chosen how she behaves. She thinks it's getting her what she wants, and she has decided to stick with that behavior. She is also an elderly woman, but she is not in a decline. She's almost faking that decline and rapidly burning through family care capital while crying, "Wolf!" In a series of essays titled Interpretations that I wrote way back in 1985, I actually addressed this matter. Let me share a thankfully recently edited version of one of those essays with you now.
The event.
Grandma's behavior has begun to change.
The interpretations.
1. The doctor. The doctor doesn't know why Grandma has begun to be senile. He is even a little reluctant to admit that she is senile yet. He prefers to attribute her behavior changes to the natural breakdown of the tissues that accompanies old age. He isn't sure, but perhaps she's had a small stroke. Perhaps her brain cells have perished from a lack of oxygen or drowned in a small pool of blood from an unimportant hemorrhage in her brain tissue. In any event, the doctor explains to the family that this type of condition is rarely reversible, although gradual improvement can be expected through appropriate therapy, antidepressants to keep her from self-harm, and tranquilizers to moderate her more violent behaviors, dosages figured in direct relationship with the amount of time she has left to live. The doctor suggests that the family have her sequestered in a nursing home where she could enjoy constant care. The family thanks him for his help and explains that they will continue to care for Grandma at home until her death. Grandma gets up from her bed and looks around, totally unfamiliar with the surroundings that she has slept in since she doesn't know. Her eye is caught by the electrical outlet next to that table, and she notices the cords, and despite the stiffness in her joints, she reaches down and unplugs them. The clock on the bed table stops. She unscrews the light bulb from the lamp and sets it next to the clock. She goes throughout the house, unplugging, unscrewing. When she is finished, Grandma goes back to bed and falls into a dream. 2. The daughter. Her daughter arose another morning to find the house unplugged. She had asked her mother a number of times why she had this obsession with the outlets, but she had received no answer that she could understand or maybe remember. Mom's senile, the daughter thought. My mother has become like a child again. She was happy to care for her mother. She remembered the care her mother had given her. In any event, as she did nearly every morning, she reconnected all of her electrical lifelines and reset the clocks, made breakfast, got her mother out of bed and to the kitchen table. Grandma is writing a letter to her friend, her high school friend. The telephone rings. She sets her paper and pen in her lap, picks up the phone from the table next to her chair. Someone wants to leave a message for her daughter, but Grandma can't find her pen. She sits staring at her lap, at the telephone, at her lap. She doesn't recognize the pen for what it is. She forgets that there is someone on the phone. She hangs up absently, picks up her pen and her pad, and continues to write. She hears the telephone ring, but it is not the phone. It is instead the chimes outside her kitchen window, in a house she remembers fondly, that she mentions to her school friend in the letter. 3. The son-in-law. Her son-in-law thought that he had been quite reasonable. Since his father-in-law passed on last year, since there was little money after his death, since his wife's mother seemed to be so depressed, he had suggested she move in with them, sell her house, perhaps use the money to travel. That was, he thought, the practical thing to do. Her son-in-law recognized that incidents, like being unable to leave a message for his wife, were becoming more common. He didn't find them troublesome. He simply hung up on the 15th ring, reminded himself to try later when his wife might answer. Her husband's death had hit her pretty hard. At first she had sat for hours staring at her now yellowed wedding portrait, tears running down her face. After a few weeks she had stopped crying and seemed to be entranced, lost completely in her own thoughts, memories. Those memories of the past were in the forefront. Memory of current events was rapidly becoming non-existent. Grandma was grateful for the care that nice man and his wife had provided, but she rarely recalled who they were, even asked them to use her first name, saying that being called Mother made her feel old, and she wasn't old, and certainly not mother to either of them. This foolish talk only came out when she was pressed for conversation. Usually she remained quiet and seemingly introspective. Grandma stood in the kitchen and cried and cried. She ran around in tight circles, clapping her hands against her hips, leaving red marks. She sat on the floor, screaming. She soiled herself, and she fell asleep, curled up on the floor, in front of the back door. Coming in from hanging the laundry, her daughter found her there when she tried to push that door open. 4. The grandson. Her grandson knew what the problem was. Grandma had been proud of her first aluminum cookware. She always warned everyone not to use them for salty foods or tomatoes, because those would puck her pans and pots. Her baking powder biscuits were fine, and no one liked them better than she did. She used a modern antiperspirant with aluminum chlorhydrate. Her salt and many of her favorite spices had alum as a free-flowing agent. She enjoyed a daily beer or soda from an aluminum can. Why, her husband had had their house sided in aluminum. Her grandson believed that so much exposure to aluminum had contributed to Grandma's evolution towards this childlike behavior, this casting away of adult limitations and responsibilities. The adults who surrounded her could label the events with the convenient, popular diagnosis of senility or even dementia. Her grandson was simply glad they had been able to keep her at home, had avoided drug treatments, had instead treated her kindly, cared for her needs, allowed her her final romp in this particular lifetime. Grandma gets up and goes into the bathroom. She turns on the light and looks into the mirror. She leans in closer and pulls down her lower left eyelid, looks deeply, watches as her face fades, watches as the movie of her life begins passing before her eyes, just as her mother had told her it would. In a flash, in a brief instant, she remembered everything of her life. And then she fell forward into the mirror.
Discussion.
Up to the point of senility, most of us would accept that there are different identifiable stages in human mental development. Let's say baby mind, then a child mind, then an adolescent, then a young adult, then an adult mind, then a mature person, then an elderly person, then sometimes a senile person. Thought processes differ from stage to stage, and the manifestations of such processes are usually considered natural progressions of the human mind. How is it that that last, senility, is considered an anomaly? No 2 or 3 or 100 individuals experience any of these general stages in the same fashion, nor does everyone necessarily go through every one of these stages in this particular order, or at all. What is the tragedy, then, of senility? It is probably just another stage of development of the mind, one which individuals who cannot understand any but the stage they are in find difficult to understand. To be understanding of the behavior of children or adolescents, well, that's often thanks to hindsight. We've been there. Are we uncomfortable about senility just because it's on the horizon instead? Aunt Maxine took no shit from Grandma Pearl. Grandma Pearl was a difficult woman before she began having strokes. The main difference post-stroke was that aspects of her personality that had before led people to label her as difficult or narrow-minded or even pious bitch, well, these later became amplified, accentuated. Aunt Maxine treated Grandma Pearl with respect, but did not allow bad behavior. Not eating what was prepared was not allowed. Not going to bed when it was time for bed was unacceptable. Refusing to bathe when a bath was needed was foolishness that wasn't even acknowledged. While an outsider might think Aunt Maxine was being overly harsh, maybe even mean with her mother, the truth is Aunt Maxine ignored that which needed ignoring and addressed that which needed addressing. Which is something I've mentioned a few times to my brothers and sisters-in-law. There is absolutely nothing that can be actively done to change the fact that the parents-in-law are aging, are elderly, and that they are now not going to change their ways. If they behave well, there is cause for reward and celebration. If they behave poorly, there is cause for a more disciplined attitude. My father-in-law needs to be helped in many ways. One is a general control of his pillbox. Another is gentle reminders to always put his keys here or his telephone there. An important one is the limitations imposed on the use of his car, imposed by the family, but he accepts and respects the limits. These are actions that will help him feel safe, comfortable, accepted as he continues on his path to wherever his elderly mind takes him. My mother-in-law is a different case. She has certain objectives and uses certain behaviors to attain those objectives. While the objectives may be valid, and they certainly are, both she and some of her children have fallen into the rut of attaining objectives through inappropriate behavior. As long as the children provide my mother-in-law with the results she expects when she uses that behavior, she has no reason to manage or alter that behavior. And let's not forget the whole dynamic of aging children caring for aging parents. There is a bit of power play here, isn't there? Are the parents listening to their children when those children take the reins? No, usually not. But the children are also not listening to the parents. Each side operates in their own little closed worlds, planting non-existent generational gaps as reasons for disunderstanding. The "no one is going to tell me what to do" versus the "I'm no longer a child, mother" exchange. When my mother-in-law greets me, not with a "how nice to see you," but rather with a "oh, my back hurts so much," well, I don't have to be all that careful. I can jocularly reply, "Your back hurts because you are old. My back hurts because I'm old. How about a proper greeting, then?" My plan is to either call the behavior out at once in a way that lightly ridicules it, or to dismiss whatever has been said with a polite, yes, yes, and then always to immediately change the subject. "How's the weather been?" Or, "How is the tomato harvest this year?" I will add that my mother-in-law's reply to my "you are old" comment was a quick-witted, "Old, no. Clothes get old. We are aging." Okay. I still changed the subject. The first reaction of the brothers and sisters-in-law to the suggestion that they try to use the agree with whatever has been said and immediately change the subject tactic is one of negation. How can we be sure? How can we ignore her when she says she is in so much pain that she thinks she is dying? Well, no one can be sure, but surely we are all intelligent enough to tell the difference between a desperate cry of "Wolf!" and the real cry for help. My mother-in-law actually does this all the time. Whenever a subject is introduced that she doesn't want to talk about, she will immediately change the subject. I've heard her meekly say, "Let's not talk about politics," but she's much more likely to stand up, interrupt everyone no matter who is speaking with a totally unrelated, "What does everyone want for dessert?" That remedy that I suggest to her children, assent and change, is exactly her tactic. If it works for her, why shouldn't it work for them? Of course, one has to be aware of and prepared for the intensification curve. The child throws a fit. The parent gives the child what he wants. The fit ends. The child throws a fit every time he wants something. The parent always gives in, as that makes the fit end. Finally, you have a child throwing a fit every time you go to the store. The remedy? The child throws a fit. The parent acts as if nothing has happened. The child doesn't get what he wants. He figures maybe the parent hadn't heard the earlier fit. The child throws a more intense fit. The parent continues to act as if nothing has happened. The fit continues, becomes more intense. The child begins to get tired, hoarse, beating his head against the floor and shouting, "Son of a bitch!" again and again, and still not getting what he wants. The child should come to a self-realization that the dynamic has changed. The fit does not bring the reward. Some other tactic must be developed. The child may try another way. The parent may accept that way, or the parent may need to teach the child the right way to get something, but never acknowledging the fit. The curve of intensification, then following action, though, is always the same. The work of the parent is both to ignore the behavior and to endure the curve of unaccepted behavior. Only then can the replacement of that behavior be effectively addressed by both the parent and the child. The same is needed in the case of the mother-in-law. If she says or does something that makes you feel bad, angry, frustrated, confused, ignore her. Don't ask for explanations. Don't try to regurgitate what she has said. Don't try to argue or try to convince her of the error of her ways or words. Simply ignore her. And don't give in. Ignore her even when she raises the stakes, acts and speaks in more desperate and exaggerated terms. Don't give her what she seeks through this behavior. Shut down the energy plant that is your reaction. However, if she says or does something that you appreciate, that you like or love, that makes you feel good, then shower her with attention, with gratitude, with love. That's what she's looking for. Sometimes it doesn't matter if attention is negative or positive, but if you only offer positive attention in reaction to positive stimulus, and if you refuse to acknowledge negative stimulus at all, then the positive will triumph as she realizes herself, which works best at helping her reach her objective. Good luck with that. Old dogs, new tricks. And in this situation, we are all old dogs, trying to learn those new tricks. I just recently applied this technique in my own life, and it is very, very challenging for all parties involved. But it seems to have been worth it. Is anyone listening? Oh, by the way, I was that kid who banged his head against the floor, shouting through my tears, "Sonny bitch, sonny bitch, sonny bitch," replacing son of a with what my parents called me as a boy, Sonny, because I had been named after my dad. My mother, without having read a single book on child psychology, left me alone in the cereal aisle at the Classens grocery store as I threw my fit, beating my head against the floor and shouting, "Sonny bitch, sonny bitch, sonny bitch," just because there weren't any boxes of Trix cereal left in the shelves. I was soon running after her, but she just ignored me until she had to lift me up into the car, and she never bought me Trix cereal again, just Cheerios. I couldn't have been more than 4 or 5 years old, but I actually have a vivid and obviously fun-loving memory of the entire scene. I wonder if it worked. I do like oats. Well, thanks for listening. Remember to
Listen, like, subscribe, and share.
This was complex one to work out. I hope it turned out well this time. Okay, cheers. En la cena en la cocina. En la cena en la cocina. Sí, es muy sí. Pues voy a continuar porque ya hemos grabado todo eso,
You're listening to Radio Revel.